Pete Hegseth believed that he possessed enough bravado and cunning to publicly humiliate a young African-American congresswoman on a live national television broadcast. He thought that his confrontational style and sharp words would leave her flustered and speechless before millions of viewers. However, what actually transpired in the moments that followed was startling and left him completely speechless, a rare state for someone so confident in his rhetorical dominance. The audience watching this clash on Fox News, along with countless viewers across social media platforms, was taken aback as the scene unfolded with astonishing speed and clarity. In that fleeting yet impactful sequence, Jasmine Crockett delivered a comeback so swift and precise that it instantly became one of the most memorable and devastating replies in the history of political televised debates. Her retort was concise, just 12 carefully chosen words, but its force was profound enough to reshape the entire narrative of the confrontation and to underline her resilience and rhetorical prowess. It was a moment poised to alter the course of political discourse and to reaffirm her position as an emerging force within Congress. Before we delve deeply into this unforgettable confrontation, it's worth pausing for a moment to ask, where are you watching this remarkable event from? Whether you're tuned in from a bustling city, a quiet suburb, or a tranquil countryside, your perspective adds a unique flavor to this story. And as you follow along, it's also worth remembering, keeping up with such moments requires awareness of the political landscape and the key figures shaping it. Now, let us set the scene. The studio lights blazed fiercely, illuminating the set of Fox News with a bright, almost searing glow. Pete Hegseth, a veteran political commentator known for his combative style, adjusted his red tie, the color symbolizing boldness and confidence, and a familiar smirk spread across his face. He had been anticipating this particular moment for a long time, a chance to challenge and disarm Jasmine Crockett, a rising star from Texas who, at just 43 years of age, had already begun to make a significant impact with her passionate speeches and her fearless willingness to challenge entrenched political powers. Crockett had been gaining attention for her fiery rhetoric and her capacity to stand her ground against the often aggressive and dismissive Republican establishment, often earning her admiration among her supporters. On this evening, Hegseth was filling in as a guest host on the popular program The Ingram Angle, a platform that thrived on sharp exchanges and ideological battles. His mission was clear: to put Congresswoman Crockett in her place, to deliver a crushing blow to her credibility, and to assert the dominance of the conservative perspective. Behind the scenes, the producers at Fox News could hardly hide their excitement. They had deliberately booked Crockett, fully aware that Hegseth's aggressive approach would likely provoke a heated clash. Their expectation was to generate yet another viral clip, one of those iconic moments where a seasoned conservative host dismantles a Democratic guest with pointed questions, leaving an indelible impression on the viewers. Such confrontational interviews had become a trademark of the network's programming, and Hegseth had established himself as one of its most relentless practitioners, often employing sharp, assertive tactics to undermine his opponents and bolster his ideological narratives. However, what the Fox team overlooked was a crucial element: an understanding of the person sitting across from Hegseth. Jasmine Crockett was much more than a politician seeking media exposure. She was a strategist, a woman with an unshakable calm, impeccable discipline, and comprehensive preparation for this very kind of confrontational testing. For weeks leading up to the debate, her communications team had worked meticulously, analyzing Hegseth's past interviews, noting his favorite attack lines, and rehearsing counter-strategies that could not only defend her position, but also turn his aggression into a powerful tool against him. They recognized that her opponent's confidence was often rooted in style rather than substance, and she had prepared to exploit this. Unbeknownst to Hegseth, Crockett did not come into this live showdown with the intention of merely defending herself or responding passively to his attacks. she arrived ready to fight, fierce and unyielding. In the green room behind the studio, Jasmine meticulously reviewed her notes for a last time, each point crafted to counter the anticipated questions and criticisms. She was unshaken, not nervous, but entirely focused. Her background as a civil rights attorney had fortified her with resilience far beyond that of typical politicians. Over the years, she had experienced confrontations with hostile judges, aggressive prosecutors, and corporate lawyers, all situations far more intimidating and high stakes than a mere television interview. Her phone buzzed beside her, flashing a message from her chief of staff. The note was clear. Remember, he might try to rattle you early in the exchange. Stay composed, allow him to overreach, then strike back sharply at the right moment. Crockett's lips curled into a subtle, confident smile as she put her phone aside and prepared herself mentally for the upcoming confrontation. Throughout her life, she had been underestimated by skeptics, opponents, and critics who doubted her ability to hold her own in a challenging arena. Tonight, she was determined to show the nation what truly happens when someone dismisses her, assuming her strength is only a facade. She knew her worth, her strength, and her intelligence, qualities that had carried her through numerous battles and difficult situations. As her makeup artist applied a final touch-up, Jasmine glanced into the mirror, taking a moment to reflect on the woman looking back at her. That reflection was not just of a congresswoman, a woman standing in a political spotlight. It was a testament to years of struggles and victories, the countless moments when she fought tooth and nail for each inch of progress that had often been hard-won and fiercely defended. She was someone who never backed down from a fight when the cause was just and right, and tonight's battle was no different. It wasn't solely about defending her reputation. This was about standing her ground for her constituents, for her values, and for the principles that fueled her work. In this high-stakes moment, Jasmine Crockett was not just a politician on a televised debate. She was a warrior prepared to face the challenge head-on, to demonstrate what true resilience and strategic thinking look like under pressure. And as the cameras finally rolled, capturing the electrifying tension of this political showdown, there was no doubt that, in that instant, the course of her career and the narrative of her political journey would be forever changed by the powerful words she was about to speak. This was more than just a simple debate. It was a defining moment rooted in the fundamental principle of standing up for those who had long been dismissed or belittled by others, those who often fell prey to the arrogance of privilege disguised as intelligence. The stage was perfectly prepared for a clash so intense and impactful that it would echo through the corridors of politics and media for many years to come, stirring conversations and debates among countless Americans. To truly grasp the significance of what was about to transpire, one had to understand precisely who these two individuals were and why their confrontation resonated so deeply with a broad and diverse segment of the population. Jasmine Crockett was not your average political figure. Her background was both humble and remarkable, rooted in the city of St. Louis, where she was born and raised. She spent years overcoming obstacles, working tirelessly through law school to carve out her place in the world. Her perseverance paid off when she became a successful civil rights attorney, fighting tirelessly for justice and equality for those whose voices were often ignored or silenced. Her unexpected victory in winning a seat in Congress, representing a district that most political pundits believed was unwinnable, surprised even the most seasoned analysts and strategists. At the age of just 43, she had already established herself as a brilliant, courageous, and unyieldingly fearless politician, someone unafraid to call out hypocrisy and injustice whenever she encountered them. Her ascent within the halls of Congress had been swift and meteoric. Crockett gained national attention after moments that showcased her sharp intellect and fearless stance, such as her pointed and unequivocal rebuke of Marjorie Taylor Greene during a House committee hearing. These instances were not isolated. She also captivated audiences with passionate speeches advocating for voting rights, which even some members of her political adversaries found difficult to ignore and, on rare occasions, to dismiss. She was widely recognized for her quick wit, her profound understanding of the complexities of law and policy, and her remarkable ability to cut through political double-talk and obfuscation with surgical precision, dismantling falsehoods and exposing contradictions with ease. Crockett's accomplishments were not serendipitous, but the result of meticulous strategy and a deep understanding of the media landscape, a battlefield where every move could either elevate or undo a career. She had studied this domain intensely, recognizing that in modern politics, a single televised moment, whether a speech, a comeback, or a confrontation, could define a political destiny. She had watched numerous colleagues buckle under pressure during hostile interviews or through calculated attacks, and she had learned carefully how to avoid becoming one of those who faltered. Her philosophy was straightforward but powerful. Never leave an attack unanswered, and always be prepared to flip the script when the opportunity arose. Her devoted staff joked that she kept a meticulously organized dossier of receipts, a detailed collection of contradictions, controversies, and pressure points associated with her opponents, ready to be deployed at a moment's notice. For Crockett, it wasn't about seeking revenge, it was about strategic preparedness, about being ready to hold opponents accountable when they questioned her credibility or attempted to undermine her. What elevated Crockett above many of her colleagues was her undeniable connection to real, often harsh, struggles. She understood hardship firsthand because she had lived it. She had worked multiple jobs to fund her education, fought tirelessly for clients who lacked the power to defend themselves, and carried the emotional and psychological weight of injustices she had witnessed firsthand in Texas courts. Her willingness to speak about inequality and systemic bias was not merely theoretical, it was deeply personal. Every sneer, every patronizing remark or dismissive gesture from powerful men, often men in positions of influence, reminded her of her clients, of individuals dismissed by a prejudiced system stacked fiercely against them. This fire within her made her a formidable opponent, but also a beacon of authenticity for those who saw in her their own struggles and hopes. Her aim was never merely to win debates, but to expose the underlying layers of unfairness, corruption, and inequality embedded in society. She fought to reveal a world where individuals like Pete Hegseth, who seemed to rise despite their flaws, exemplified the unfairness that allowed some to succeed without merit, while forcing others like her to constantly prove their worth again and again. Crockett's perspective was rooted in honesty and justice, and her determination to challenge the status quo made her a symbol of resistance and integrity in a system often criticized for favoring the privileged. In stark contrast to Crockett, Pete Hegseth embodied everything she opposed. At the age of some 44 years, the Fox News host had crafted his career by fueling outrage and confrontation. His background in the Army National Guard provided him with a discipline and sense of authority, but he had channeled those experiences into a media persona built on controversy and relentless attack. Leveraging his military service as a credential, he soon transitioned into the realm of television, where he became a prominent figure on cable news channels that thrived on inflaming divisions. Hegseth was infamous for his smug interruptions, biting sarcasm, and a persistent need to dominate every discussion, never missing an opportunity to insult, condescend, or dismiss those he disagreed with. His style was confrontational and provocative, designed to stir emotions rather than foster productive dialogue, and his reputation was built on attacking opponents with a combination of sarcasm, and sharp-tongued ridicule. This confrontation, therefore, was not just about a debate over policies. It symbolized a battle of contrasting worlds, one rooted in authenticity, struggle, and principled resistance, and the other characterized by bravado, manipulation, and the pursuit of sensationalism. The moment was charged with the weight of these opposing visions, with Crockett representing resilience and truth, and Hegseth embodying the spectacle often celebrated in modern media, a spectacle that often prized superficiality over substance, outrage over understanding. The outcome of this clash would undeniably influence public perceptions, capturing the attention of millions and revealing much about the political and media landscape as it stood in that critical moment. Recently, there had been whispers and speculation circulating within political circles and media corridors that Pete Hegseth might be considered for the pivotal role of Secretary of Defense under President Trump's new administration. Such a move, no matter how tentative or preliminary, sparked quiet discussions even among some members of the Republican Party, who privately expressed skepticism and concern about the potential implications of appointing him to such a high-profile national security position. Nonetheless, Hegseth's reputation as a formidable and compelling presence on television had solidified his position as one of the most reliable and influential figures at Fox News, a network known for shaping conservative narratives. His unique combination of unwavering confidence and aggressive, sometimes combative demeanor had earned him a loyal following and made him a recognizable face for viewers who trusted his particular brand of commentary. What truly set Hegseth apart and simultaneously made him a figure both effective and potentially perilous was his exceptional skill in presentation. He was a highly articulate communicator, able to speak fluently and convincingly, even when expressing controversial or extreme viewpoints. His disciplined delivery and mastery of language enabled him to package radical ideas in a way that sounded smooth, controlled, and, on the surface, reasonable. This capability extended to his use of subtle signals, commonly known as dog whistles, that allowed him to convey messages intended for a targeted audience while maintaining sufficient plausible deniability to avoid direct accusations of offensive intent. His ability to craft and deliver such nuanced messages was a key factor in his popularity among viewers seeking confirmation of their beliefs without overt provocation. For the executives and producers running Fox News, Hegseth was a ratings powerhouse. His shows attracted millions of viewers, and his confident on-air persona made him an essential asset for the network's programming lineup. However, beneath his polished exterior and confident facade, Hegseth harbored a notable weakness, a blind spot that could ultimately undermine his rising career. Despite his adeptness in debating unprepared political adversaries or polite guests who hesitated to challenge him forcefully, he had not yet encountered someone prepared and disciplined enough to counter his own tactics. His past victories had been against relatively unthreatening opponents, politicians caught off guard, or guests too cautious to push back with equal resolve. Over time, this pattern fostered a sense of arrogance within him, a dangerous overconfidence that risked blinding him to real threats. This overconfidence was about to be tested in a new and more dangerous arena, as recent developments brought Hegseth's ambitions and reputation into sharper focus. His name had been floated as a candidate for Secretary of Defense, a nomination that drew not only praise from his supporters, but also increased scrutiny from opponents and watchdog groups. Oppositional researchers and political opponents began digging into his past with renewed vigor, sifting through records, interviews, and public statements. The findings they uncovered, sometimes embarrassing, other times damaging, began to echo loudly across the media landscape, threatening to tarnish the image he had painstakingly built. The very platform that had elevated him to fame and influence now posed a paradox. It was also the stage from which he could be exposed and discredited. This was no longer just about ratings or political points. It became a battleground for influence and reputation. With Donald Trump back in the White House and a conservative majority riding high, Fox News had transformed into the epicenter of partisan warfare, where ideological clashes played out live on television screens across America. In this volatile environment, humiliating or embarrassing an opponent on national television was perceived as a power move, proof that he could take down a rising Democratic star, sow discord, and reinforce conservative narratives. Standing across from Hegseth on that particular night was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a member of the House representing Texas. Her presence starkly contrasted with him. She was a self-made politician who had fought tooth and nail for her place in the chamber, embodying a generation of Democrats eager to challenge the old guard and progressive ideals. To Crockett, this moment represented more than just a televised debate. It was an opportunity to show that her generation would not be cowed or silenced by the well-funded, slick media personalities who often seemed untouchable. The disparity between them could not have been more pronounced. On one side was Hegseth, a privileged Fox host, untested by true adversity, who had built his reputation on polished appearances and confident front-facing rhetoric. On the other side was Crockett, an authentic, resilient, self-made congresswoman who had faced life's struggles head-on and earned her seat through perseverance and conviction. As the cameras whirred and the national audience tuned in, neither of them could have predicted that the ensuing 18 minutes would irrevocably alter the course of both of their careers. The scene was set for a clash of worlds, one rooted in established media privilege, the other in raw political truth and determination. Once the theme music of the Ingram angle faded into the background, and Pete Hegseth, acting as the guest host, leaned forward with a confident posture, his eyes intently fixed on the monitor, indicating his readiness to engage. The screen displayed Congresswoman Crockett from a remote studio, her image crisp and composed amidst the bright, artificial lights of the television set. Hegseth's trademark grin carried a mixture of anticipation and sly amusement, signaling that he was prepared to enjoy himself and, perhaps, to get the upper hand in the upcoming exchange. He began the interview with a formal yet patronizing tone, addressing the Congresswoman directly. "We are now joined by Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, representing Texas," he announced, already adopting that familiar tone of subtle condescension that had become his signature. His voice conveyed a mixture of politeness and underlying skepticism. "Congresswoman, thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight. I must admit, I am somewhat surprised that you agreed to appear on this program. It seems that many of your Democratic colleagues have chosen to stay in the shadows these days, avoiding the spotlight." Crockett's expression remained steady, calm, composed, and unfazed by the opening jab. She responded with poised professionalism, her tone steady and self-assured. "Thank you for having me, Pete. And no, not all Democrats hide from the truth. We believe in engaging in honest conversations, even when they're challenging." Hegseth's subtle deployment of this initial remark had clearly succeeded in planting a seed of mild irritation or challenge. It was a carefully crafted provocation, designed to elicit either a defensive response or to frame her as evasive. His smile widened slightly, a calculated move to project confidence and to encourage her to step into the verbal trap he was laying. "Well," he continued, shuffling some papers theatrically, an old broadcast trope. "Let's talk about the truth then. You've been quite critical of President Trump's cabinet nominations, haven't you?" His words hung in the air, loaded with insinuation, ready to spark a fiery exchange that could either advance his narrative or expose weaknesses in hers. Isn't it intriguing, and perhaps even a bit revealing, that someone with such limited practical experience dares to judge the qualifications of individuals who have truly dedicated their lives to serving their country in times of peril and need? The phrase "limited experience" uttered by Heggs with a deliberate and patronizing tone, seemed to hang heavy in the air, almost dripping with condescension, as if to remind everyone listening that her background was somehow insufficient or less valid. A subtle yet unmistakable insult radiated from his words, causing a ripple of discomfort among viewers who could easily pick up on the underlying derision. The impact was so palpable that, in living rooms across the nation, regardless of one's political leanings, some conservatives began to shift uncomfortably, sensing that a line had been crossed from respectful debate into personal attack. This wasn't merely a discussion about policies or qualifications. Heggs was consciously attempting to belittle her, to diminish her credibility in front of a broad audience. Crockett, however, had encountered such rhetorical tactics before. She recognized instantly what was happening. This was an old trick, one she had seen many times in courtrooms, where adversaries sought to undermine her authority not by presenting sound arguments, but by questioning her right to speak or her worthiness to be heard. Men had tried this before, aiming to chip away at her confidence, to sow doubt about her credentials. Yet this time, she faced not a single courtroom, but the national stage, where millions watched and listened, their perceptions shaping opinions that could carry significant consequences. She tilted her head slightly, a subtle gesture that could be mistaken for contemplation, but within her, a faint smile began to form, an expression that, to those who knew her well, signaled that she was carefully calculating her next move. It was a dangerous sign, implying she was not intimidated or defeated. Yet, Hegseth, too caught up in his performance, failed to notice her composure. She repeated the phrase, "my limited experience," with an even, measured tone that demanded clarification. She then posed a pointed question. "You mean my law degree? My years spent fighting for civil rights as an attorney? Or the fact that I am an elected representative of the people of Texas? Which part of my background do you consider limiting, Pete?" The atmosphere in the studio grew tense, a silent, almost suffocating stillness. The air seemed to thicken as everyone's attention focused sharply on the exchange. Hegseth's grin stiffened, but he refused to back down. Instead, he doubled down, pushing forward with a dismissive tone. "Come on, Congresswoman," he scoffed. "You've been in Congress for what, 2 years? Before that, you were just a local attorney in Texas. Meanwhile, you're criticizing decorated veterans and highly successful business people. Don't you think that's a bit presumptuous?" His tone emphasized the words "local attorney" as though they should serve as an insult, implying that her career had been somehow trivial or insignificant. Almost as if she had been running a lemonade stand rather than fighting fiercely for civil rights and justice. A segment of Fox viewers nodded along with this dismissive portrayal, perhaps agreeing in their minds that her experience was limited or unworthy. But not everyone was convinced. Some viewers, even among conservatives, began to feel uneasy. There was something slightly off about this exchange, an unspoken shift that didn't sit well. Crockett could sense it too. The atmosphere was changing. A subtle tug that signaled her opponent's attitude was beginning to backfire. Sensing her opening, Hegseth responded, his voice still steady, but now tinged with the pride that often accompanies defensiveness. "Being a local attorney in Texas," he declared, "meant representing people who couldn't afford the fancy lawyers and fighting tirelessly for their rights." But then, with a slight smirk that betrayed a hint of arrogance, he added, "But tell me, what exactly did you do before you became a television host? That might be an interesting story." His words served as an invitation to back off, a moment where he might have chosen humility, but instead, his pride compelled him to press forward, falling straight into the trap Crockett carefully set. She anticipated this move and seized the moment. Hegseth's face contorted into a sharp, humorless laugh, an expression that, in the context of the debate, signaled not amusement, but mockery. "What did I do?" he repeated, holding her gaze. "I served my country. I was deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, while you were, filing paperwork in Dallas." This, what some would interpret as a pointed dismissal, elicited murmurs from the audience, some of whom were already feeling discomfort, even among the most loyal conservatives. It was no longer just a question of credentials. It was beginning to feel like an attack on her integrity. Hegseth wasn't merely challenging her opinions, but was openly mocking her achievements, attempting to diminish her contributions and experience. Yet, Crockett held her ground, pressing onward. "Then I worked in the private sector, built a career in media, and now I have been nominated to serve in one of the most significant roles in government." Her words carried weight, her tone steady and confident. "So, if you think my qualifications are lacking, I would suggest you reconsider, because they might just be a little more substantial than the results of a local election." She leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing, adopting that same steely courtroom look she had used countless times before. That gaze, sharp and unwavering, signaled that she was prepared for the final move, one that could change everything. For a brief moment, the studio audience was plunged into an awkward silence, the tension almost tangible. Hegseth smirked again, this time convinced that he had triumphed, convinced that his record of military service combined with media fame had overshadowed Crockett's entire career. But beneath that confident expression, her face told another story. Her calm had remained intact, an unshakable presence, hinting that she was in control of the situation and aware of the trap she had laid. Her quiet confidence promised that the next words would be decisive, and that she was ready to turn the tide of the debate. Her gaze was fixed steadily on the camera lens, the entire room seemingly holding its breath as her expression shifted into one of subtle amusement. That faint, almost playful upturn of her lips had the power to draw viewers in closer, making them hang on her every word, eager to hear what she might say next. In a voice that was soft, yet undeniably confident, she repeated her point, as if savoring the sound of the words, drawing out their meaning with deliberate care. Then, with a measured and precise movement, she leaned slightly forward, her eyes still locked onto the camera, and declared in a tone that conveyed both respect and defiance. "Pete, I want to acknowledge your service, sincerely. But let's be honest here. Serving your country, while admirable, does not automatically grant you the right to demean or insult those who serve it in a different capacity or manner. The mere fact of wearing a uniform does not instantly make someone honorable or deserving of respect. True honor is demonstrated by the actions you take, the choices you make, long after the uniform comes off." Her words struck sharply, hitting their mark with surgical precision. The live camera captured every nuance, the subtle strength in her voice, the intensity behind her gaze, and the studio's atmosphere grew tense in an instant. The control room fell into a strained silence. A handful of producers exchanged uneasy glances, instinctively recognizing that a storm was brewing they hadn't quite anticipated. No one had expected her to respond so fiercely, nor with such a compelling moral authority woven into her retort. Hegseth blinked in surprise, visibly caught off guard by her quick retort, but he quickly regained his composure. He forcefully laughed, though the sound was hollow and lacked sincerity, revealing his attempt to dismiss her remark. "Oh, come on, Congresswoman," he retorted, trying to cast her words aside with a dismissive tone. "You sound like you're attacking veterans now." His words felt like a feeble attempt to undermine her, to paint her as someone unfairly targeting those who have served. Crockett, unfazed, replied instantly, her voice smooth and controlled like polished glass. "Not at all. I'm not attacking veterans. What I'm addressing is the hypocritical attitude that sometimes surrounds conversations about service and patriotism. There's a clear difference between criticizing policies or attitudes and attacking the individuals who have worn the uniform." The studio's atmosphere thickened with unspoken tension. She didn't need to raise her voice to make her point. The unwavering firmness in her tone was more impactful than shouting could ever be. Her words carried a quiet, unwavering power that seemed to shift the balance of authority in that heated moment. Suddenly, Hegseth's condescending demeanor appeared diminished, smaller, less substantial, like a man desperately clinging to control, aware that his position was slipping. Behind the scenes, the producers working tirelessly in the control room were beginning to panic. The live broadcast was still ongoing, and their host was clearly losing the upper hand, the momentum shifting against him. One producer silently mouthed, "Cut to a commercial," signaling an instinctive move to cut the segment short and regain control. Yet, the director furiously shook his head, signaling otherwise. "Cutting now," he signaled back, "would look like surrender. We need to let it play out, see how it develops." Understanding that retreat might only escalate the situation, they chose to leave the confrontation unfolding naturally. Hegseth shuffled his papers again, attempting to regain composure and buy more time. "Well, that's a lovely talking point," he said, artificially dismissive, attempting to silence her with a tone that lacked conviction. But beneath his words lurked an underlying dismissiveness, a straw attempt to dismiss her as merely playing to the crowd. "But you and your Democratic friends seem more interested in playing the victim than actually addressing the real issues or finding solutions," he continued, his voice tinged with condescension. The familiar narrative was clear, an attempt to shift blame and diminish her words. Crockett tilted her head just slightly, her expression remaining unbothered. An almost tranquil confidence emanated from her stance. She echoed his words softly, almost as if turning them back on him. "Playing the victim," she repeated, then paused, her gaze unwavering. "Pete, I represent a district in Texas where families work tirelessly, sometimes 3 jobs just to cover rent, to put food on the table for their children. In my district, kids often share textbooks because there aren't enough resources, and hospitals are shutting their doors, victims of policies made by folks who think like you." She paused briefly, emphasizing her point. "Those aren't victims. They're survivors. They're people fighting every day simply to keep their heads above water." Watching from home, the viewers could almost feel the sharp sting in her words, the raw honesty of her message. She didn't shout. She simply told the truth. Each word was saturated with lived experience, with the stories of real people facing hardship in overcoming adversity. Her tone was steady, unwavering, and unflinching, carrying the weight of genuine compassion and authenticity. But Hegseth wasn't done. The need to assert his perspective overtook him once more. He scoffed and retorted, "You Democrats always claim you're here to help people, but somehow things just get worse. Maybe it's because your solutions promote dependence instead of promoting responsibility." His words echoed the familiar refrain, a classic Fox News argument, that poverty is a result of laziness and compassion equals weakness. Crockett had heard those arguments many times before. She had long since learned to anticipate such lines in debates like this. She was prepared, waiting for just the right moment to respond. "Dependency," she said, her eyes narrowing slightly, her voice calm but commanding. You mean like billion-dollar corporations that rely on government bailouts to stay afloat? Or politicians depending on large donations from those same corporations? Because, from where I stand, that looks a lot more like real dependency, where the powerful depend on the government and corporations, rather than the honest effort of families trying to feed and care for their children. Her words cut through the superfluous arguments, spotlighting the hypocrisy behind the rhetoric often used to divert attention from real issues. She knew well that true dependency wasn't the families working multiple jobs or trying to survive. It was the wealthy and the powerful who relied on government handouts and corporate influence to maintain their positions. Her clarity and conviction left no room for silence or denial, shining a stark light on the true nature of dependency in their political landscape. Even in households where traditional values and conservative beliefs reigned supreme, the viewers watching this event could not help but pause, their attention caught by the sudden shift in the atmosphere. For a few intense moments, it was as if the entire script of the discussion had been turned upside down, revealing an unexpected vulnerability and sharpness on the part of the speaker. The woman on screen, poised and confident, had unexpectedly flipped the narrative, forcing everyone to reevaluate what they thought they knew. Her words cut through the tension like a sharpened blade, and though Hegseth attempted to mount a response, he found himself moments away from losing the crucial momentum he'd been relying on. Crockett, the moderator, pressed forward, undeterred, and then made a bold statement. She looked directly into the camera and began an incisive critique, highlighting a fundamental inconsistency in the way political discourse is often framed. "Pete," she said, voice clear and unwavering, "I've noticed something quite revealing. When working-class people ask for help, it's labeled as socialism. But when wealthy individuals receive handouts, it's called economic policy." Her words emphasize that, in truth, the distinction is less about ideology and more about who is requesting assistance. It's about the identity of the asker, not the nature of the aid itself. The viewers could sense that beneath her calm exterior lay a sharp, analytical mind, unafraid to call out inconvenient truths. The camera remained fixed on her face, capturing every nuance of her expression, her steady gaze, the slight firming of her lips, as she delivered her message with conviction. Meanwhile, clips of the exchange rapidly spread across social media platforms, being captured, captioned, and shared in real time. The moment was fervently dissected online, with viewers commenting and reacting as the seconds passed. Within mere minutes, Hegseth found himself trending across various internet channels, his name gaining popularity for all the wrong reasons. Recognizing that he was beginning to lose the upper hand, he attempted to steer the conversation onto a safer, more controlled path. He half smiled and said, "All right, Congresswoman," feigning a composed tone. "Perhaps we should focus on accountability. You've previously criticized Fox News for spreading misinformation. Do you believe you're suggesting that you actually know better than our viewers?" In response, Jasmine emitted an immediate retort that shifted the dynamic entirely. She said, "Pete, I'm simply stating that your viewers deserve the truth. Truth free from fear disguised as patriotism." Her words, spoken with effortless elegance, reverberated through the studio and beyond, resonating with a force that was both devastating and precise. It was a reply crafted with careful choice of words, yet its impact was far greater than any blunt insult could have achieved. The entire audience in the studio reacted with a quiet gasp, some leaning slightly forward as if to better understand the moment's gravity. Even Hegseth's eyes flickered with a flicker of uneasiness, a subtle sign that the punch had landed hard enough to disturb him. He attempted to laugh it off, but his chuckle sounded strained and hollow, betraying his true feelings.
"Now, I must say,"
Crockett added, her tone shifting slightly to mock a sense of theatrical performance.
"you seem quite the performer, Congresswoman."
But Jasmine answered without hesitation.
"I don't perform, Pete. I represent."
The simplicity and strength of that statement, delivered in a succinct yet piercing manner, would soon become one of the most replayed soundbites from the entire interview. It was a defining moment that encapsulated her stance succinctly, resonating deeply with viewers and reinforcing her identity as a sincere, outspoken advocate. By this point, the segment had gone completely off script, unraveling the pre-planned flow of questions and answers. Recognizing their potential for viral fame, the production team subtly permitted the exchange to continue, knowing full well that unpredictable moments like these could become invaluable. What they did not realize at that moment was how significant this particular interview would become in the annals of media history. It was destined to be one of the most viewed clips ever aired on the network, though not for the reasons the producers initially envisioned or intended. Hegseth's tone grew noticeably more serious and assertive. He sought to regain control, grasping for specific points amidst the chaos.
"Let's get precise," he demanded, voice firmer. "You've accused members of this administration of corruption. That's a very bold claim, especially considering your own party is embroiled in internal conflicts and accusations of infighting."
Jasmine responded with a small, nonchalant shrug. Her reply was delivered with the calm of someone who knew exactly what they were doing.
"Pointing out corruption isn't a bold statement. It's an essential one.
And if your party spent less time defending those accused of criminal activity and more effort protecting the principles of democracy, perhaps we wouldn't find ourselves in such a crisis today." Her words, sharp and unambiguous, came across as a surgical strike aimed at her opponent's weak spots. The online response was immediate and overwhelming. The comment sections on platforms like YouTube and Twitter flooded with emojis of applause, laughing faces, and countless quotable snippets of her remarks, further fueling her rising popularity. Yet, Hegseth, determined to maintain composure, pressed on, eager to challenge her further. Leaning a bit forward in his chair to emphasize his point, he asked, "So, if I understand you correctly, you're implying that the tens of millions of Americans who voted for President Trump, people who support him passionately, are somehow part of the problem?" His voice was tinged with a challenge meant to provoke, an attempt to pin her to a divisive label. But Crockett refused to bite. "Remain calm and measured," she replied with studied ease. "No, Pete. I believe those who voted for President Trump are victims of manipulation by people who deceive them for ratings and political gain." Her words struck a chord, and upon hearing them, the viewers at home, even many dedicated supporters of the network, paused in their reactions. The atmosphere shifted as they realized she was not attacking individual voters, but exposing a deeper, more insidious issue: the manipulation and exploitation inherent in modern political messaging. Hegseth's jaw tightened visibly. The subtle, involuntary twitch of irritation was something the camera caught clearly, betraying a change from composed host to someone visibly agitated. That small twitch, barely perceptible to some, signified a crucial moment of inner conflict, as he struggled between maintaining control and grappling with the undeniable strength of her arguments. For the first time in his broadcasting career, he experienced a genuine surge of anger, a feeling so intense that it caught him off guard. Leaning back in his chair, he tried to mask his irritation with a forced, almost sarcastic laugh. "Wow, Congresswoman, it really looks like you've come here today solely to deliver a sermon, haven't you?" he remarked, his voice tinged with underneath condescension. The slight widening of Crockett's smile revealed that she wasn't particularly fazed by his tone. With calm confidence, she responded, "No sermon, Pete. Just facts. Facts that you're perhaps not accustomed to hearing." Meanwhile, in the studio, the crew members exchanging nervous glances understood that the tension was reaching a boiling point. The director in the control room, sensing the escalating discomfort, softly muttered to himself, "She's owning him." One producer, seemingly caught up in the unfolding drama, discreetly whispered, "Should we cut to a commercial now?" To which another quickly responded, "No, let it play out. We want to see how far this can go." It was clear to everyone present that the atmosphere on set was electric, thick with unspoken anticipation, as if the very air between them could be sliced with a knife. Soon, the moment arrived that would irrevocably define the entire episode and leave a lasting mark on the career of the executive producer. Glowering with visible irritation, Hegseth decided to shift to a more personal attack, a tactic he had used many times before to humiliate less seasoned guests. His voice, dripping with assumed superiority, mocked her from across the studio.
"You know, Congresswoman," he began, carefully enunciating each word, "you're remarkably confident, considering your entire career seems to be built around playing the victim." There was an icy note in his tone as he continued, "You boast about justice and fairness, but what have you actually done, besides complain?" His words lingered ominously in the air, venomous and pointed, deliberately crafted to diminish her presence, to make her appear overly emotional and unaccomplished, an age-old tactic from the conservative playbook used to undermine outspoken women, especially those with strong convictions. Yet, Crockett didn't flinch. She paused momentarily, taking a deliberate, slow breath, maintaining her composure with admirable poise. Then, fixing her gaze, not at Pete, but directly into the camera lens, as if speaking to the millions watching at home, she delivered a succinct yet piercing response that would forever be etched into the annals of television history. "I don't complain, Pete," she stated calmly but firmly. "I expose people who profit from pretending to care." Her words, simple yet devastating, cut through the charged silence that immediately followed. The studio seemed to freeze. Hegseth's face stiffened as if struck by an invisible force. The audience in the studio, along with viewers at home, sat motionless, absorbing the impact of her decisive statement. Even through the camera feed, one could feel the collective intake of breath, a universal sign that the power balance had suddenly and completely shifted. It was not solely the content of her reply that astonished everyone. It was also the manner in which she delivered it. She remained composed, measured, her voice carrying a quiet but unmistakably lethal edge. The line hit with the force of a gavel, a judge's gavel, delivering its final, unanswerable verdict. It was an ultimate blow designed to silence any further refutation, to leave an indelible mark in the minds of all who watched. In the control room, a producer, stunned by the turn of events, muttered under his breath, "Oh my God, she just killed him!" Another whispered, "That's the moment. It's the clip, the viral highlight that will be remembered forever." And indeed, they were right. Within minutes, the entire internet erupted in a frenzy of activity. The 12-word takedown stormed across social media platforms, amassing millions of views before the segment itself had even concluded. Memes, remixes, and reaction videos flooded timelines, transforming her succinct statement into a symbol of verbal sharpness and unwavering courage. The phrase, "I don't complain," swiftly became a rallying cry, resonating with countless viewers who cheered her on as a symbol of truth and resilience.
Meanwhile, in the studio, Hegseth attempted to recover his composure, forcing a tight, forced smile, and muttered awkwardly, "Well, that's one way to look at it," despite the evident damage that had been done. Crockett, however, was far from finished. She responded effortlessly, her voice steady and calm, as if the confrontation had merely been a minor inconvenience. "It's the only way," she said simply, "because the truth doesn't require spin or manipulation, only courage." Her decisive, unassailable line effectively sealed the fate of the conversation, the final nail in the coffin of his credibility. From that point onward, there was no chance for Hegseth to regain control. He stumbled through the remaining part of the segment, asking canned, pre-scripted questions, each one more feeble and lacking in confidence than the last. Crockett answered every query with ease, her dignity intact and her poise unshaken, demonstrating professionalism and strength amid the chaos. When the cameras finally cut away to commercial, the control room erupted into a mixture of chaos and quiet celebration. Some producers quietly cheered, recognizing that they had just witnessed a defining moment in television history, one that would be remembered long after the broadcast had ended. Others sat silently, stunned by the magnitude of what they had just seen, fully aware that the clip of Crockett's sharp retort would transcend that single night's broadcast and become a symbol of fearless truth-telling for years to come. As for Hegseth, he remained seated behind the desk, seemingly frozen, staring down at the papers in front of him, his smile nowhere to be seen. The defeat was evident in his expression, and everyone understood that this encounter had marked a turning point, one that would be remembered as an iconic example of standing firm against those who rely on manipulation and personal attacks. It was a vivid reminder that truth, delivered with calm confidence, can be the most powerful weapon of all, capable of transforming an ordinary broadcast into an unforgettable moment of courage and clarity. The moment initially appeared to be designed as an opportunity, a carefully crafted segment intended to elevate and showcase his stature, perhaps to boost his political ambitions, or simply to demonstrate his influence. Instead of accomplishing that goal, it inadvertently turned into a catastrophic blow that shattered his reputation into irreparable fragments. Jasmine Crockett, the woman involved, simply detached her earpiece with a composed gesture, then rose from her seat without uttering a single word. Her movement was measured and graceful, embodying an air of self-assuredness and calm confidence, an unmistakable sign to everyone present that she understood she had just made history in a way that would be remembered for a long time to come. Meanwhile, just outside the glossy facade of the Fox News building, the true chaos was only beginning to unfold. By the very early hours of the following day, the brief clip had already begun to circulate with explosive speed, igniting a firestorm across the entire internet. It spread like a wildfire racing through a dry forest, firing its way across all the major social media platforms: TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. In less than 12 hours, the clip amassed a staggering number of views, already surpassing 10 million, becoming an unstoppable phenomenon. As the morning turned into noon, the clip's reach was omnipresent. It was featured on every morning talk show, dissected in political podcasts, and parodied on late-night comedy programs. It seemed that everyone, from casual viewers to political pundits, was fixated on that single, defining moment. The reality was clear. This was not a matter of mere complaint. No, I don't complain, Pete. I expose individuals who profit from pretending to care. Those 12 words uttered during that exchange had evolved into a rallying cry, a symbol of resistance, a slogan that cut through the noise, becoming a form of moral reckoning. Commentators were quick to praise it as perhaps the most precise and effective verbal knockout in the history of modern televised political discourse. Even those journalists and analysts who normally preferred to overlook or dismiss viral footage found themselves unable to turn away. On MSNBC, seasoned anchors replayed the exchange repeatedly, analyzing every micro-expression, every subtle nuance of Crockett's demeanor, trying to decipher what her silence conveyed. The New York Times described this moment as a profound shift, a kind of generational change in how politics was communicated, understood, and contested in the digital age. Even on outlets with a conservative bent, a subdued, almost uneasy laughter could be heard, as these networks struggled to spin the narrative in Hegseth's favor, though their efforts mostly fell flat. The fallout within Fox News itself was immediate and intense. By around 8 o'clock in the morning, internal emails raced through the network's servers, an urgent scramble of strategizing and debate. Senior producers argued fiercely over whether to remove the clip from Fox's official YouTube channel, weighing the potential benefits of engagement against the humiliation and damage it could cause. Some claimed that leaving it up might actually generate clicks and viewership, while others warned that retaining the footage would only deepen the embarrassment. By midday, the clip had been mysteriously removed from Fox's online platforms, vanishing as if it had been erased by an electronic ghost. However, by that time, the damage had already been done. Millions of viewers had already downloaded, re-uploaded, and shared the clip across the internet. An anonymous former Fox producer confided to the Daily Beast that they initially believed this would be another straightforward win, a viral moment of Pete Hegseth being owned by a liberal, something to laugh at and move on. Instead, the incident turned into a masterclass in how to effectively dismantle arrogance and hubris using only calm, precise language delivered at just the right moment. In the center of this storm, Jasmine Crockett remained entirely silent, content not to engage in interviews or social media posts, and certainly not seeking any victory laps or self-congratulation. Her silence, in fact, only amplified the impact of that moment. Without uttering a single word afterward, she allowed her composure and stillness to speak volumes. This restraint transformed her act into an even more powerful symbol, an emblem of quiet strength and moral clarity. Meanwhile, Pete Hegseth's phone was ringing nonstop. However, not with congratulations or positive messages. Instead, he faced a deluge of less flattering calls. Sponsors began reevaluating their contracts and distancing themselves, worried about associating with the increasingly tarnished image he was now projecting. Corporate executives and public relations teams hurriedly worked behind the scenes, scrambling to craft statements that might stem the tide of damage. The once loyal conservative influencers, who previously lauded him, now hesitated even to mention his name, let alone defend him. Rumors began to swirl quickly through the political and media corridors of Washington, feeding the construct of a narrative that gained momentum by the hour. Some suggested that his potential nomination to serve as defense secretary had been quietly put on hold, a lesser-known but telling sign of the mounting disapproval. Others claimed that prominent donors had started questioning whether his provocative, brash persona, once seen as his strength, had finally crossed an invisible line, alienating key allies. That very evening, when the famous Ingram Angle show aired again, Pete Hegseth was noticeably absent from the screen. Officially, the network claimed he was taking a short, personal leave to reflect and recover from the controversy. Yet, insiders whispered a different story, one of damage control meetings, emergency rebranding strategies, and carefully orchestrated efforts to restore his reputation behind closed doors. Behind the scenes, the network was actively seeking ways to contain the fallout, trying to prevent the moment from further spiraling out of control. Yet, amidst this media storm and political turmoil, something else was quietly unfolding in the broader landscape of politics. The calm, defiant silence displayed by Jasmine Crockett had resonated far beyond her own party's circles. Her composure and refusal to engage in acrimony or posturing struck a chord with a much wider audience, one that appreciated strength, dignity, and clarity in moments of chaos. Her act of quiet resilience exemplified how a simple, composed response could amplify a message and challenge the status quo in a way that words sometimes simply cannot. Many independent voters, particularly those among the younger generations, found themselves captivated by a viral clip that quickly spread across social media platforms. This short video featured a powerful moment in politics, accompanied by a caption that boldly proclaimed, "This is how you handle bullies." It was a phrase that resonated with many who had long yearned for politicians willing to stand firm against aggression and intimidation. And in this instance, it rightfully described a brave and principled figure, a woman who finally demonstrated what true backbone looks like in the realm of American politics. The woman in question was a congresswoman, and her bold stance triggered a remarkable reaction that rippled throughout the political landscape. Her inbox, which was normally filled with routine correspondence, was suddenly inundated with an overwhelming flood of messages. Hundreds of thousands, in fact. These messages came from various walks of life: teachers expressing their admiration, veterans acknowledging her courage, nurses offering words of support, single parents recognizing her integrity. All of them wrote to thank her, conveying a shared sentiment that she had articulated what many had been feeling for years but had lacked the voice to express openly. Among the notes, one simple but deeply meaningful message stood out. "You didn't just stand up to him, you stood up for us." This comment encapsulated the profound impact of her actions, emphasizing that her bravery was not merely about responding to an individual, but about representing often unheard voices across the nation. Immediately following this moment, political analysts and commentators began to refer to it with a special term, the Crockett moment. The phrase quickly gained traction, illustrating how a single, well-timed act could symbolize a turning point in political discourse. Television networks, notably CNN, dedicated segments to analyze the incident. Their morning panels replayed the clip in slow motion, dissecting precisely when and how the momentum shifted during her exchange. They observed that the moment when control slipped from her opponent's hands and firmly landed in hers marked a significant change, a point at which the entire energy of the confrontation transformed. One seasoned political analyst pointed out that it was not merely her words that made the moment stand out. It was her remarkable calmness, her disciplined demeanor in the face of hostility. She did not raise her voice. She did not flinch or show signs of emotional distress. Instead, she exuded an effortless composure, demonstrating dignity and restraint that outclassed her adversary entirely. Her poise left a lasting impression that transcended what was being said. It revealed a level of class and control that many considered a much-needed example in a hectic, often chaotic political arena. While this was unfolding on television and social media, most of Washington's political circle remained immersed in their own chatter, speculating and gossiping about the implications of the incident. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett, the woman at the center of this remarkable event, continued her day as usual, resolute and unfazed. Back in her congressional office, her staff was busy managing a relentless stream of communications. Journalists clamoring for interviews, supporters and donors reaching out with words of encouragement, grassroots organizations inviting her to speak at upcoming events. At one point in this bustle, her communications director, Mia, knocked gently on her door and poked her head in. She couldn't hide her excitement as she asked, "You've seen the numbers, right?" Jasmine, sitting at her desk, looked up with a composed expression, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips. "I've seen enough," she replied calmly, her tone reflecting confidence and acknowledgement. Mia shook her head in amazement. "It's insane," she admitted. "You're trending across 23 states. Even some Republicans are quoting you now." Listening to this, Jasmine leaned back in her chair,
thoughtful. Her mind processed the reality of what was happening, and she allowed herself a moment to reflect. Maybe they're finally listening, she murmured softly. This statement was far from arrogance. It carried the weight of genuine reflection. It suggested an awareness that something larger was unfolding, a collective awakening of sorts. The incident that began as a televised ambush had unexpectedly ignited a nationwide conversation, not just about the individual confrontation, but about broader themes: integrity, hypocrisy, and the true meaning of power in politics. The event became a symbol that transcended the original context, marking a shift in how political moments, especially those showcasing restraint and dignity, were perceived and valued. By the following day, the story's significance was further cemented by major media outlets. The Washington Post ran a front-page article titled "The Moment," with a subtitle that read, "In an era of shouting matches and relentless spin, one congresswoman proved that calm can be the most formidable weapon of all." This framing underscored the novelty and importance of her composed response in a political climate often characterized by chaos and aggressive posturing. The admiration was not confined to the left. On social media platforms, a surprising wave of praise emerged from unexpected sources, including conservative veterans and others who might not have shared her political views but recognized the strength she displayed. Even those who disagreed with her ideologically acknowledged her mastery of restraint. One Marine veteran commented publicly that while they might not see eye to eye with her politics, you cannot deny that she handled that situation better than 99% of politicians ever could. However, not everyone viewed the incident with admiration. For Pete Hegseth, the politician immediately involved in the altercation, and at the center of the controversy, the impact was far more damaging. As the days progressed into the midweek, late-night comedy hosts took no mercy, roasting him mercilessly for his handling of the confrontation and the fallout. Comedians such as Stephen Colbert made biting jokes, suggesting that Hegseth claimed his military service made him more qualified to handle tough situations. In stark contrast, Jasmine Crockett's poised response was seen as a lesson in humility. Another host, Trevor Noah, humorously remarked, "Pete went to war overseas and lost one at home," capturing the irony of a person seeking to demonstrate strength abroad but failing to control his composure in a domestic political showdown. Internet memes flooded social media feeds, featuring side-by-side images of Hegseth smirking before the confrontation and looking stunned and speechless afterward. The captions highlighted the contrast. "Confidence before impact" became a trending phrase, symbolizing the sudden collapse of Hegseth's composure and credibility. While the digital world reveled in these jokes and memes, the more serious political insiders and observers recognized that something far more significant was taking place beneath the surface. Crockett's remarkable performance, her calm, articulation, and unwavering demeanor, was starting to influence perceptions of what constitutes effective leadership and the art of political communication. Her ability to turn a contentious, potentially damaging moment into an example of dignity and strength was shifting the narrative. This unanticipated event did more than just garner immediate attention. It reshaped the way political media moments were understood and appreciated. No longer was shouting or theatrical outrage the only path to commanding attention. Instead, poise, intelligence, and an unwavering commitment to one's principles had proven to be a more powerful form of influence. A clear lesson that, in the game of politics, sometimes silence and calm speak louder than any emotional outburst ever could. For many years, the prevailing perception among political observers and the general public alike was that Democrats tended to approach confrontations with the far right with excessive caution, often hesitant to engage in direct, forceful opposition. This image painted them as overly restrained, perhaps even passive, leaving some to believe that a lack of assertiveness was a weakness rather than a strength in political battles. However, Jasmine Crockett shattered this stereotype in a way that few could have anticipated, fundamentally altering how political struggles are perceived and managed.
A renowned political strategist captured this moment perfectly during a broadcast on PBS. She expressed that Crockett's victory was not merely about winning a debate or scoring points in a fleeting argument. Rather, it signaled a profound shift in the tone and approach of political defense. From that point onward, projecting serenity and composure in the face of aggressive attacks was no longer seen as a sign of helplessness or weakness. Instead, it emerged as an assertion of true power, a demonstration that inner strength and calmness could be far more impactful than shouting or aggressive rhetoric. As the days and weeks unfolded following this pivotal moment, Jasmine Crockett finally decided to break her silence publicly. Interestingly, she chose not to do so through the usual mainstream outlets like Fox News or CNN, but instead turned to her own social media pages. There, she posted a short but impactful video clip, precisely 12 seconds of footage from the interview that had previously made waves, accompanied by no spoken words or explanatory captions. The only visual element at the end was a stark black screen bearing simple white letters, bearing her message: "We can't control how they attack us, but we can control how we respond." This minimalist yet powerful statement resonated widely, and within mere hours, the post attracted approximately 5 million views across various platforms. Hashtags emerged quickly beneath the video, with phrases like "HatRocket Response" and "I Expose, Not Complaining" dominating the feeds across the nation. This viral moment became a catalyst for a broader conversation about strength and composure in politics. Many observers, including some of her political opponents, privately admitted that Crockett's social media move was one of the most effective communication strategies they had ever witnessed. Elegant in its simplicity, unwavering in its message, and perfectly aligned with her stance. Simultaneously, support for Crockett's principled approach showed clear signs of growth. In Texas, her home state, fundraising efforts surged remarkably, with supporters pouring donations into her campaign coffers at an unprecedented rate. Volunteers flooded her local offices from all around, eager to assist and be part of this rising movement. A prominent political columnist drawn to her story noted that Crockett's display of composure under pressure echoed what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had done earlier for progressive messaging. But this time, it was Crockett's mastery of calmness that became her defining trait. Despite this wave of admiration, not everyone was celebrating her success. Within the conservative ecosystem, a backlash began to brew. Talk radio hosts launched aggressive attacks, accusing her of disrespect toward military veterans and questioning her patriotism. Some even alleged that Fox News had orchestrated the entire incident for political gain, attempting to set her up for failure. Yet, no matter how intense the criticism became, it failed to obscure the harsh reality that Pete Hegseth's credibility, the Republican opponent she had faced, was irreparably damaged. Many sponsors withdrew their support from his campaign, unwilling to associate with a losing persona marred by scandal and perceived weakness. As a result, his nomination quietly faded into oblivion, lost amid the turbulence of political fallout. Throughout this turbulent period, Jasmine Crockett remained notably humble, choosing not to gloat or boast about her accomplishments. When a reporter caught up with her in the corridors of Capitol Hill and asked how it felt to have effectively ended Pete Hegseth's political career, she paused briefly, offered a gentle smile, and replied with quiet dignity, "I didn't end anything. I simply told the truth and allowed people to decide for themselves what to do with it." Her response was a textbook example of grace, measured, balanced, and impossible for critics to distort or dismiss as mere arrogance or triumphalism. Weeks passed, and the chaos gradually settled into a more subdued landscape. During this calm, a major magazine conducted an in-depth feature on her journey, not only focusing on her current moments of prominence, but also tracing her evolution from a civil rights attorney fighting for social justice to a respected congresswoman who had managed to dismantle one of the most outspoken and loudest voices on cable news using only a handful of carefully chosen words. The cover picture captured Jasmine Crockett standing behind a podium, mid-sentence, her expression calm and determined, with the headline boldly declaring, "The voice that wouldn't back down." Within the pages of this feature article, her story was told in detail. It recounted her early days as an advocate for civil rights, highlighting her relentless pursuit of justice. It chronicled her transition into politics, emphasizing how her ability to maintain composure became her most potent asset, especially during the tense moments that culminated in her defining social media statement. The piece vividly described the night she confronted one of cable news' loudest personalities, using just 12 words that echoed far beyond the studio and into the wider consciousness of the nation. In the closing paragraph of the article, the writer summed up her legacy eloquently. Against the backdrop of an era characterized by outrage, provocation, and shouting matches prompted by every trivial issue, Jasmine Crockett exemplified grace and resilience. She reminded America that real strength does not lie in how loudly you shout. Rather, it resides in how steadily you can remain composed when the entire world seems determined to silence or dismiss you. That one simple sentence encapsulated her essence entirely. Her poise, her clarity of purpose, and her enduring impact. It underscored her message that true power is rooted in calmness under pressure, a lesson that will resonate long after the headlines have faded. Meanwhile, Pete Hegseth chose to withdraw from the limelight for several months. His attempts to stage a political comeback through interviews fell flat, as the public sentiment had already shifted. Every time he appeared and tried to explain or defend himself, observers and commentators reposted Crockett's famous line, "I don't complain." Over time, Pete's image morphed into a meme, a symbol of resilience and the futility of whining in the face of criticism. His face became synonymous with quiet endurance and unspoken refusal to be defeated. By the end of the year, the entire episode transcended its original political context, transforming into a broader story about integrity, strength, and the power of unwavering calmness in the face of adversity. High school debate teams, in their relentless pursuit of mastering persuasive communication, had begun to analyze her interview techniques with keen interest and detailed scrutiny. These aspiring debaters, eager to refine their rhetorical skills, dissected every nuance of her calm demeanor, trying to understand the underlying elements that made her so effective. Meanwhile, professors of communication, those learned specialists who educate future journalists, broadcasters, and public speakers, demonstrated in their lectures how her extraordinary composure could serve as a perfect example of poise under pressure. They broke down her methodical delivery, emphasizing how her ability to stay composed under scrutiny turned any potential attack into a demonstration of strength. Even leaders in the business world, often regarded as masters of negotiation and strategic communication, referenced her response as an exemplary model of how to succeed without resorting to loudness or aggression. They pointed to her approach as a testament to the power of authentic, measured speech that commands respect rather than demands it. And perhaps the most telling moment of all came months later, during a live panel discussion when a veteran anchor from Fox News, showing a degree of cautious respect, finally brought her name back into the conversation. It was a deliberate act, a recognition that her calm and confident response had made an impression that transcended immediate controversy. During that exchange, the anchor openly acknowledged that the incident with Crockett had imparted a valuable lesson. He admitted that it had revealed something fundamental. Perhaps what Americans truly desire in their discourse is not louder statements or more aggressive posturing, but sincerity and genuineness. They do not necessarily crave vocal dominance. Instead, they seek authenticity, a real connection rooted in clarity and dignity. The audience in the studio responded to this acknowledgement with warm applause, their appreciation for her poise clear in their enthusiastic support. Meanwhile, in a congressional office somewhere nearby, perhaps in her own, Jasmine Crockett listened quietly to the conversation. A gentle smile touched her lips because she understood well that this moment was more than just a fleeting viral incident or a single pundit's stumble. It was emblematic of something much larger, a reclaiming of dignity in a political arena that often seems to have forgotten how true strength can look. Her actions had gone far beyond silencing a critic. They had initiated a cultural shift, one rooted in the belief that integrity and calmness could indeed transform the tone of public discourse. This movement had begun with a simple yet powerful gesture, the spoken word delivered with unwavering calmness, clarity, and without a trace of fear or arrogance. Those 12 words, spoken with conviction and respect, had sparked a foundation for a new kind of dialogue, one where genuine authenticity reigns supreme. And that, in turn, offered hope that perhaps, amid the chaos and noise, Americans truly yearn for communication that uplifts and unites rather than divides or diminishes.